Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, the 12th chapter, as it says, Jeremiah's prayer, in which it covers, once again, Jeremiah's petition really to the Lord to bring, to basically inquire, right, almost like Ezra did, about why it is that the wickedness, right, of Israel, right, those that are wicked and dealing treacherously are allowed to prosper, even up until this point, in which the Lord gives him an answer, all right, and then goes on to describe the judgments that he would bring, not only to Israel or to Judah, but to the neighboring nations. So this is Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 1. Righteous art thou, O Lord Yahweh, when I plead with thee. Yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. So Jeremiah is saying basically, whatever case I bring before you, you judge it righteously, right? You plead my cause. So I want to, there's something that I want to discuss with you, concerning, as it says, thy judgments. Wherefore or why doth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are all they happy that deal very treacherously? So now Jeremiah is understanding, and he's asking the Lord, like, why is it that, you have the wicked ones still in a position of authority, still in a position of power to be able to manipulate and take advantage of, your people, right? Why is it that they that deal treacherously are happy? They look like they're in a good state. Verse 12, thou hast planted them, yea, they have taken root. They grow, yea, they bring forth fruit. Thou art, so like, you've allowed them to grow, right? And likening them onto a tree to grow, to so-called flourish, right? As it says, to take root, to grow and bring forth fruit. And though their fruit is a corruption, thou art near in their mouth. And what that means is they're quick to mention the name of the Lord. So to give the appearance as though they are, somebody that is holy or following the Lord, and far from their reins. The Lord is far from their actual inward parts or their thoughts. Basically highlighting their hypocrisy, right? As it says here, you have planted them and they have taken root and prospered. Your name is on their lips, but you are far from their hearts. But thou, O Yahweh, knowest me. Thou hast seen me and tried mine heart toward thee, right? So you know me. You've proven me, right, to be a worthy, upright servant. Pull them out like sheep for the slaughter, right? So set them up, like the image of sheep that are in the sheep pen. And, to say the shepherd or the owner comes and he's trying to have a banquet or whatever, they'll select the sheep and then they'll separate them from the rest of the flock, obviously, whether the sheep wants to go or not. And they would go and slay them, right, for preparing them. So the Lord is saying here, Jeremiah is asking the Lord to do that to them, pull them from the congregation and slaughter them like sheep and prepare them for the day of slaughter. How long shall the land mourn and the herbs of every field wither for the wickedness of them that dwell therein? Meaning, because of the wickedness of, these Israelites and the things they were doing, it warranted the judgment of the Lord in terms of things like famine, and droughts and so on. Hence, the land would mourn, right? The herbs or the grass would wither away because of the lack of rain as a form of judgment for their wickedness. The beasts are consumed because they have nothing to eat, and the birds because they said, he shall not see our last end, right? And that last part, he shall not see our last end, is them speaking mockingly about the Lord not basically knowing, how things are going to turn out for them, right? In terms of them speaking reproachfully concerning the prophecies that Jeremiah was saying that, hey, the Lord says this is what's going to happen to you. They didn't believe that. So they're saying, no, you don't, who are you, right? You can't dictate what's going to happen to us. And by fortifying their wickedness in that mindset, they continue to do more wickedness. And the Lord continued to bring these plagues upon them, causing even the land and the animals to suffer. Verse 5. So this is what Jeremiah's complaint is to the Lord. And the Lord replies, if thou hast run with the footmen, and they have wearied thee, then how canst thou contend with horses? And what the Lord's reply here was, what you're dealing with compared to what you're about to have to still go through, this is likened on to running a race against the footmen. And if you're already, having trouble with this, how are you going to deal with what comes next, basically? Okay, as it says, contend with horses. And in this case, Jeremiah was starting to see the full picture now and starting to taste the bitterness of this role, having his, relatives and family members and those of his city come against him. But that was really him contending or running with footmen, because as we read later on in the chapter, eventually this would get to the point where even the nobles, right, the king and so on, would hear word and they would seek after his life. And that would be contending with the horses. So the Lord is basically telling him, like, you have a great deal, right, a great while still to go. And if this is what's bothering you, how are you going to endure what comes next? And if in the land of peace, wherein thou trustest, they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of Jordan? And what it's saying here is, like, compared to what comes next, which would be likened unto the swelling of Jordan. The swelling of Jordan is basically the region or the portion of the Jordan River. And around there you had, like, for example, wild lions and bears and so on and so forth that would come out from that area. So the Lord is saying here, what you're dealing with now is likened onto, a land or a terrain you're familiar with, versus what you're going to have to deal with, which is likened onto the unsureties and the dangers of that region of Jordan. I'm going to pull this up in the in another translation. NLT, for example, this is not bad. Or even NIV. It says, if racing against mere men makes you tired, how will you race against horses? If you stumble and fall on open ground, what will you do in the thickets near the Jordan? Verse 6, for even thy brethren and the house of thy father, even they have dealt treacherously with thee. Yea, they have called a multitude after thee. Believe them not, though they speak fair words unto thee. And basically, as the Lord is saying here, right, continuing in the same thought of verse 5, is that, look, as part of the job that I've brought you here to do, right, and the things that you're going through, this shouldn't be something that's shocking to you, right? Because even your brethren, your relatives, right, as it says, even thy brethren and the house of thy father, which would be his relatives, even they have dealt treacherously with thee. Because remember that what Jeremiah was teaching and him, speaking the words of the Lord, because Israel wasn't, they weren't seeking after the Lord in sincerity, the things that Jeremiah was saying, you had a lot of people that came against him for that, which included even his relatives. So that the Lord was even warning him about that, to say, hey, be cautious even of those that you may think are close to you, no matter what they say to you. This is what's really going on in their heart. That's why he says they've dealt treacherously with thee. So they may sound like they're on your side, but inwardly they're actually not. Okay, and you're going to find out very soon. It says, yea, they have called a multitude after thee, which is like another way of saying they've raised complaints about you, right? And you would think, like, damn, all right, that's my family. At least even if the city comes against me, they would have my back. But behind the scenes, that's not the case, right? It says, believe them not, though they speak fair words unto thee. So they may speak fair words, like they may speak in a way where it sounds like they're supportive of you, but in actuality, they're not. All right, so let's read this in the NLT. Even your brothers, members of your own family, have turned against you. They plot and raise complaints against you. Do not trust them, no matter how pleasantly they speak. And this is like, behind your back, they may be like adding. So if there are already people that were against Jeremiah, and now you have even those of your relatives that are adding on to that fire, but when you're around, they make it seem like, oh, they're with you, but behind the scenes, they're really like, yo, yeah, he is a problem, and adding on to word getting out more and more to where now it's like, yo, you damn near got wanted posters all over the place, right? That's I mean, that's just, you know, me giving an example there. Obviously not 100% the case, but you get the point, right? That's what the Lord was saying to Jeremiah, right? So be cautious, be careful. Verse 7, I have forsaken mine house, I have left mine heritage. And this is the Lord speaking, saying, forsaken his house, because the judgment he has pronounced against them, you know, it would destroy everything, right? His temple, his heritage being Israel. So it was likened unto him forsaking them for a moment, as we know, but because their actions warranted this kind of judgment, right? So I have forsaken mine house, I have left mine heritage, I have given the dearly beloved of my soul, which is the nation of Israel, in particular here at this point is Judah, into the hand of her enemies, which would be the Babylonians. Mine heart is unto me as a lion in the Salakia. Mine heritage is unto me as a lion in the forest. So the heritage, being Israel, is likened, the Lord is likening them unto like a wild lion. It crieth out against me, therefore have I hated it. Meaning, you know, my heritage, which is supposed to be my dearly beloved, is like a wild lion that's like basically trying to attack me, right? Coming against me. And therefore I deal with it. I had to deal with it accordingly. So to hate it doesn't mean the Lord, you know, is like, I'm never going to deal with these people anymore. But it triggered the Lord to bring that almost like a hateful wrath, as some could see it. Okay, because that's the only way to deal, right, with these kind of people when they're coming at you like that, as he described them onto like a lion in the forest. So what this looks like is these people that you love, but every time you try to reach out to them, they'll kill your prophets, right? They'll continue to do more and more wickedness, right? They'll basically snap out against you. And so the Lord had to treat them with hate or become like an enemy unto them by bringing, you know, the famines, the siege, the enemies, the foreign nations, and so on. Verse 9, mine heritage is unto me as a speckled bird. And when you go into that speckled bird, right, it is, let's look into the word speckled. It is one that stands out, right, of an unusual color, you could say. So a colored or variegated speckled, right? Let's copy that. It says here dyed, right, in stripes, like I guess the example they gave here was a hyena. Yeah, so variegated, it says exhibiting different colors, especially as irregular patches or streaks. So what does that do? That causes you to stand out, right? So the Lord is saying here, he's saying here, mine heritage, Israel, has become like, it's like they're likened onto this speckled bird, right, that stands out. Therefore, right, the birds round about are against her. Nature shows you that when you have a animal, like even if it's like a ape or a bird that comes out looking different than the rest, it's really excluded. Okay, and sometimes they'll even attack it because they'll look at it as something is wrong, and therefore they don't want it to spread amongst them, right? They ostracize it and they try to get rid of it. So the Lord is likening this situation to Israel being in the midst of these other nations as this speckled or outlier bird, and the birds that are round about, as it says, are against her. Come ye, assemble all the beasts of the field, come to devour. Now it's also interesting because Israel was different, right? In terms of nations, we would be likened onto a speckled bird, in the sense that we were different from these other nations around us, right? Our laws, our manners, our customs, everything we did was different. right? Now, of course, there's the layer, right, to this verse in terms of the actual physical appearance, the phenotype of Israelites looking like all different, you know, varieties. Okay, but in terms of the context of Jeremiah 12, um, this is where I'm relating it to, right? So the Lord is saying here, assemble all the beasts of the field, which would represent the neighboring nations and the foreign invaders, and come to devour, right? Come and attack her by order of the Lord. Many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They have made, and these pastors being the shepherds, right? And they have destroyed my vineyard, the vineyard being the nation of Israel. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They have made my pleasant portion a desolate wilderness. And how did they do this? Through wickedness and greed, they misled the people of the Lord, leading to them being in a destroyed state, which the Lord likened unto his vineyard being trodden underfoot and being made a desolate wilderness. They have made it desolate, and being desolate, it mourneth unto me. So due to their wickedness and leading Israel, astray, that warranted Israel to become, in this destitute state, because they erred, which warranted judgment against them, and now they're in they would be in a destitute state, mourning unto the Lord. The whole land is made desolate because no man layeth it to heart, meaning nobody cares. Okay. Verse 12, the spoilers are come upon all high places through the wilderness, being the foreign army, right? And in the NLT, it's worded as, on all the bare hilltops, destroying armies can be seen. The sword of the Lord devours people from one end of the nation to the other. No one will escape, i.e. the time of judgment. And all this that the Lord is saying, right, is future for Israel at this point in history. So it says, for the sword of the Lord Yahweh shall devour from one end of the land even to the other end of the land. No flesh shall have peace. So nobody is going to escape this. And what that means is the majority, right? Or nobody that has been targeted is going to escape this, right? Because we know Jeremiah, for example, the Lord have mercy on him. Verse 13, they have sown wheat, but they shall reap thorns. They have put themselves in pain, but shall not profit. Sowing wheat, if you sow wheat, you expect to reap the crops of it. The Lord is saying here that they're going to expect benefits or peace, and they're going to get, judgment, right? When you sow wheat, you're not expecting thorns. But if you do get thorns, that's like an evil thing onto you. They have put themselves in pain, meaning they've labored, but they're not going to profit from it because it was in wickedness. And they shall be ashamed of your revenues being the harvest, because of the fierce anger of the Lord. So when you go to expect, the result of what you've planted, what you're going to get is going to be, something you don't expect, i.e. that evil reward, you could say. Why is that? Because of the fierce anger of the Lord, because you disobeyed the Lord. Verse 14, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, against all mine evil neighbors that touch the inheritance, which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. These are referring to the neighboring nations, right? If you look at map of Levant, Bible Times. Okay, maybe this might work. Cool. So you can see here, right? They are, I don't know if this is in the Old Testament times, or maybe it is. Okay. So you can see here, you have Israel, right? We had our regions and our territory, but you had neighboring nations, right? You had Edom, which was literally on our border. You had the Philistines, you had the Moabites, you had the Ammonites, right? You had the Syrians up north, Tyre and Zidon, and so on and so forth, right? And so, as the Lord says here, all of those evil neighbors that touch the inheritance, which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. So when in history, right, when the Lord had us endure this calamity, the neighboring nations saw that and they took advantage of that, right? And even in particular, you read about that the Edomites also came in there and burnt the cities and the temple and so on, right? They partook in that. So they touched wrongfully the inheritance, right? The people and the land that the Lord caused us, Israel, to inherit. The Lord says, behold, I will pluck them out of their land and pluck out the house of Judah from among them. So not only would we be taken out of our land, but these nations would also be taken away captive. They would also suffer judgment at the hands of the Lord. And a quick precept for this is, or not a quick precept, but a precept for this is in Ezekiel 25, verse 3. It says, and say unto the Ammonites, hear the word of the Lord Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because thou saidest, aha. Now remember, Ezekiel was also pretty much contemporaries, right, with Jeremiah, except Ezekiel is, his ministry is after the Babylonians actually come to the land the first couple of times, and then they take captive Israelites back to Babylon. As they took Daniel and the three holy children and so on, they also took Ezekiel. And so from Babylon is where Ezekiel was prophesying, but Ezekiel was prophesying before the Babylonians made their return back to Jerusalem to destroy it, which was some years after that, right after the first siege or first exile. So while he's there, this is what he's prophesying concerning, he prophesies concerning Israel, but also the neighboring nations. So matching what we just read in Jeremiah 12, it says here, because thou saidest, aha, against my sanctuary, when it was profaned, and against the land of Israel when it was desolate, and against the house of Judah when they went into captivity. Behold, therefore I will deliver thee to the men of the east for a possession. Remember, we just read that he was going to pluck them out of their land as well. For a possession, and they shall set their places in thee, and make their dwellings in thee. They shall eat thy fruit, and they shall drink thy milk. And I will make Rabbah a stable for camels, and the Ammonites a couching place for flocks. And ye shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because thou hast clapped thine hands, and stamped with the feet, and rejoiced in heart with all thy despite against the land of Israel. Behold, therefore, I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, and will deliver thee for a spoil to the heathen. And I will cut thee off from the people, and I will cause thee to perish out of the countries, and I will destroy thee, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord. That was Ammon, one of the neighboring nations, right? The evil neighbors. Then Moab, verse 8, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because that Moab and Seir do say, behold, the house of Judah is like unto all the heathen. So now they've become like us. They're weak. Therefore, behold, I will open the side of Moab from the cities, from his cities, which are on his frontiers, the glory of the country, Beth Jeshimoth, Baal Meon, and Kiriath Thaim, meaning the Lord will cause a breach to where the Babylonians would be able to take them over, onto the men of the east with the Ammonites, and will give them in possession, that the Ammonites may not be remembered among the nations. And interestingly enough, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to find any actual history aside from biblical history on the Ammonites, okay, from when they were taken out of the east from the actual land. And I will execute judgment upon Moab, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. Now on to Edom, which is another nation. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because that Edom hath dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, and hath greatly offended and revenged himself upon him, or upon them. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I will also stretch out mine hand upon Edom, and will cut off man and beast from it, and will make it desolate from Teman, and they of Dedan shall fall by the sword. And I will lay vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel, and they shall do in Edom according to mine anger, and according to my fury, and they shall know my vengeance, saith the Lord God. Philistia, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because the Philistines have dealt by revenge, and have taken vengeance with a despiteful heart, to destroy it for the old hatred. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will stretch out mine hand upon the Philistines, and will cut off the cherethims, and destroy the remnant of the seacoast. And I will execute great vengeance upon them with fury, or furious rebukes, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh, when I shall lay my vengeance upon them. So going back to Jeremiah 12, that's what the Lord said he would do for them touching his inheritance. And it shall come to pass after that I have plucked them out, I will return and have compassion on them and will bring them again, every man to his heritage and every man to his land. So the Lord is saying after, after we have been taken out of our land, right, and plucked out, at some point, the Lord will return and have compassion on us. Now, yes, we were able to come back from the Babylonian captivity into our land, but ultimately, really, this fullness would happen at the very end, right, in our time now, right, where the Lord would return us back to our land, okay, and also after the 1,000-year captivity of these nations, as is written in Revelation 20, they would also return to their lands, right, to return to their normal, quote unquote, normal lives again, but under us, okay. Verse 16, and it shall come to pass if they will diligently learn the ways of my people. So this is the evil neighbors, right? If they will learn the ways of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, to swear by my name, the Lord Yahweh liveth, as they taught my people to swear by Baal. So just as they taught us the ways of the heathen, right, as we learned, the idolatry from them, if in that time, and this is when we are in authority, we are in rulership, the nations that basically make themselves subservient and serve us and follow the ways of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, just as they taught us to follow the ways of Baal, the nations that do that, as it says, then shall they be built in the midst of my people. Being built in the midst of my people doesn't mean they're going to be mixed in among us, right? All it means is that they're going to basically be allowed to have their lands back. So the midst of my people really is just them being in their respective lands, right? Their heritage, which is in the region of where our land is as well, right? As I showed here, right? Because you had the Moabites land here, the Ammonites land here, the Edomites land here, and so on, though Esau is going to lose his land, right? But all that means is that they would be allowed to return back to their lands, though they would have to pay tribute to us. Okay, and a precept for this is Micah chapter 4, verse 2, right? And many nations shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord Yahweh from Jerusalem. See? So as we just read here, right, the nation that will diligently learn the ways of us, they're going to basically be allowed to have their lands back, okay, and dwell there. It says here, but if they will not obey, and another precept actually I had for that was Revelation 20 and 5. It says, but the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. This dead is referring on to the heathen nations. Them not living again doesn't mean that they wouldn't actually be alive again. But when you go into the word lived, it means to be restored, right, to a normal life, right? To live again, recover life, to be restored to a correct life, right? One who returns to a better moral state. So they would serve captivity for that 1,000 years, but after that, they would return to, having their lands and living a somewhat normal life under us. Verse 17, but if they will not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation, saith the Lord Yahweh. And this is Zechariah 14 and 17. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord Yahweh of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague, wherewith the Lord Yahweh will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, because they will not obey. This is the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. See, so as the Lord said here, if they don't obey, he will pluck them up. He will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation. Okay, and we just read an example of how he would do that. And that brings us to the end of the Jeremiah, the 12th chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.